Good evening, everybody. If you have a mobile phone, if you'd like to put it on silent, please, thank you. Right, massive welcome for the first time, Phil Evangelinos from near Manchester with Agenda 2030, how the UN will soon control our daily life. And the UN, remember, are armed, non-elected, so you can't sack them. One of its salesmen is the Pope. No doubt interested, as it sounds a little bit like a modern day Inquisition, or maybe there is a cut from the carbon credits. Phil highlights what is in store for us within the next 14 years under sustainable development and its impact on leisure, industry and us personally. Everybody needs to be up to speed on this subject. Please welcome Phil Evangelinos.
Well, thanks for having me tonight for the first time. I'm actually quite intimidated because it's a large crowd, so I'll try and do my best. Please don't have too many expectations. Now, the funny accent is because I'm of Greek origin. I've lived here for about 17 years now, and I'm trying to do my best with your wonderful language, but sometimes I find it hard, so please have that in mind. I'm coming from a small group down south in Manchester, from Cheadle in Cheshire. We call it the Truth Movement, and it's on Meetup. And I've heard so many things about this group. Many people are talking about New Horizons, and I've always wanted to be here and meet Rob and the whole team. And thanks for having me. I chose the subject today, Agenda 2030, because it is very crucial for what is going to happen in the near future. For us personally, our personal lives and the way things will change as in relation to the way we live and to the way we govern ourselves. It all started back in 1992, and it was this UN conference on environment and development in Rio de Janeiro. At that point, 178 countries, including United Kingdom, met together with the priority to do something about the environmental change and how that impacts the planet. So they came up with an agenda with many different goals. They called them the MDGs, Millennial Development Goals. And it was an agenda that was put together for the next 100 years. That's why it's called 21, because it was basically for the 21st century. And it was this voluntary action plan that offered suggestions for sustainable ways that local, state, and national governments can implement so they can combat poverty, pollution, and conserve natural resources in the 21st century. Now, this vague plan that concentrated mainly around the environmental change has formed into a far more reaching and far more incorporating plan. And the time scope is not anymore 100 years, but only 14. And that's why now they call it Agenda 2030. So you see, we're now in 2016, so they have something in plan for us which will have a final day target of 2030. Before we get into this plan, because there are certain things about the terminology used to put this plan together, I want you to take a step back and see what a now almost prophetic book from George Orwell called the 1984. George Orwell is making the case that if a government can control all media and interpersonal communication, while at the same time forcing the citizens to speak in a politically code-droll jargon, ultimately it will blunt independent thinking. So in a similar way, this Agenda 2030 uses terminology and jargon to hide its true and real intentions. So straight out of the United Nations website and under the link sustainabledevelopment.un.org, you see this preamble of Agenda 2030. Is one which I would like to read that through, because I will pick certain words and phrases that they give you an idea of what they have in plan. Then it says, this preamble, this agenda is a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity. So they want everyone to adopt this plan, the whole planet. It also seeks to strengthen universal peace in larger freedom. We recognize that eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, is the greatest global challenge and indispensable requirement for sustainable development. And this is the blueprint phrase, sustainable development. It's a new world order terminology that hides behind this vague idea of sustainability to hide its true intentions, which is about abolishing human rights in the name of this sustainability. And it says all countries, again, everyone needs to fall behind, and all stakeholders acting in collaborative partnership will implement this plan. We are resolved to free the human race from the tyranny of poverty and want to heal and secure a planet. So you see grandiose claims that they never really found fulfillment in all the thousands or hundreds of thousands of years of human history. We are determined to take the bold and transformative steps which are urgently needed to shift the world into a sustainable and resilient path. As we embark on this collective journey, we pledge that no one will be left behind. So you see this underhand blackmail that everyone, even by force, will have to fall behind. And the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, you remember what I said earlier, it was MDGs, now it's SDGs, and 169 targets, which we are announcing today, demonstrate the scale and ambition of this new universal agenda. So what do these goals try to do? They seek to build on the Millennium Development Goals and complete what this did not achieve. So if they had these goals in the beginning and they didn't work out, how do they think they're going to work out this time around? They seek to realize the human rights of all and to achieve gender equality. And that's very interesting because straight away from the preamble of so many targets, what they're talking about is gender equality. And I'll touch on to that later. And the empowerment of all women and girls. They're integrated, indivisible, and balance the three dimensions of sustainable development, economic, social, and environmental. So I want to read that through because that's where everything is being put in front of you. And then they're going to have to elaborate with all these 17 goals. So here you are. You have the first one, no poverty. Second, no hunger. So these two kind of go together. And that's a great thing. To eradicate poverty is something that everybody wants. Then you have good health, quality education, and then you have the fifth one, the gender equality. Then on the sixth one, you see clean water and sanitization. So we're starting now to talk about energy and resources. And then renewable energy, again, they are connected with number 6. And then you go on to good jobs, economic growth, innovation and infrastructure. It goes on to number 10, reduce inequalities, which is kind of the same as number 5, gender equality. Number 11, which is a very interesting goal, sustainable cities and communities, which I will expand later on. And number 12, responsible consumption. Now, as you go through the last ones, you find the shift of how far they want to go to control everything around the environment. Climate action, that's something they have been talking for a long time, but now you see life below water, life on land. So this is things that they want to put under their hands that they don't have already. Number 16, peace and justice. And if you read the history of the United Nations, they have been talking about peace and security for the 70 and odd more years of the existence of the United Nations, never achieved it. And number 17, they want now new partnerships to implement these goals. Now, it is a long list, and I have picked up a few of those, which are the most interesting and the ones that will impact your life. And I would like to go through them with you. No poverty. We all want in this room, I think, a planet where people want to live without being poor and have the basic means of life. So we agree on the fact that to end poverty in all its forms is something which is great for the human race. But what they really mean is they want to redistribute wealth and resources to make the super rich wealthier and the middle classes poorer. Now, before we go on to number 2, I'd like to touch here something which an economist called David Woodward is one of the top economists in the world, and he's writing in the World Economic Review, which is a financial journal for most governments have access to. And he says this, which is very interesting. He says that this expression, we want to eradicate poverty, is not possible under any economic model. And he says it's not possible that it won't happen. He said it will definitely not happen. It's physically impossible to happen. It's a structural impossibility. And he says this, assuming an impossible scenario where we can maintain the fastest rate of income growth that the poorest 10% of the world's population have ever enjoyed over the past few decades, it will take at least 100 years to bring the world's poorest above the standard poverty line, which today is $1.25 a day. Now remember, you don't live on $1.25 a day, okay? Whatever Agenda 2030 promises to achieve, poverty eradication won't be one of those things. Now, that immediately raised the question, do they know that they are setting an impossible goal? Of course they do. And they count on their goal to fail, causing untold poverty for the rest of us, and achieving the real goal of impoverishing the world's population to the point they're more controllable and more manageable. Because, you know, when they try to implement this goal, they will make you to go down to the $125. And that won't happen, of course, but you will be poor at the time. Now, the second one is this one: end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. What they mean, though, is GMO crops. They want to increase this use of drought, flood, and aluminium-resistant GM crops fortified with synthetic vitamins and minerals, and create disease and cause depopulation. Now, research and studies demonstrate that genetically modified GM food potentially serves two purposes, neither of which is to feed the starving masses or increase crop yield on a long-term basis. Instead, the purpose of GM food appeared to be some sort of a bad science fiction nightmare. Ultimately, three things could be achieved under this goal. They will reduce the human population by poisoning the food supply. They will cause increased cancer, inflammation, disease, organ failure, and premature death. And at the same time, they will use food to covertly render the population infertile. So that is the translation of this goal and what they want to achieve. And of course, the final and ultimate goal behind this, that they will hand over to only few elites and their companies the full control of all the food supplies here on Earth, which is not the case at the moment. And as Henry Kissinger said, control oil and you control the nations. Control food and you control the people. Now, you have to backtrack here and ask, has this happened before? Why do they rely on this kind of scenario? Yes, it has happened. If you read the story, the history of the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin back in the 1920s and 30s did exactly the same. He starved millions of Russians to death as a way to control them. And he moved many people to major cities where they've lost their natural place to live, and also they lost their connection with their land. Now the fourth goal, it says ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. But we do have schools today, and they do a good job, especially here in the United Kingdom. So do they mean that they will try to do that for places like Africa or other developing continents or countries? That's very interesting. What they really want to do is they want to socially engineer children to conform to politically correct agendas. And they want also to standardize and dumb down their curriculum and to produce adults incapable of dependent thinking. Now, the type of education the United Nations promote gives reason for pause and alarm, because as we speak now, they have already in place a certain program which is for a global school, what a global school will look like in the future. And they call it the International Baccalaureate, or IBO program, a program available to schools around the world. So how does this program work out? First of all, this works like a charity. It's like an NGO, a non-governmental organization. So if you're a school or a college or university anywhere around the world, you can apply to be part of this program. And what is taught in this program is things that they don't promote national identity. And if you know the United Nations Educational and Cultural Education Program, which is UNESCO, they promote socio-political agenda, pushing ideas that are counter to democratic values and national state rights and identity. Now, it promotes also UNESCO mandates that include downplaying nationality, social equality through redistribution of resources and sustainable development by putting resources on the hand of big elites and away of the rich, of the little people. They also endorse this IBO school, which is this one, and that's the logo. They also endorse the Earth Charter. Now, the Earth Charter, which is part of the UNESCO agenda, advocates the distribution of wealth between and within nations, same-sex marriage, pantheism, and military disarmament, which is really things, especially military disarmament and redistribution of wealth within the socio-political agenda, is not something that kids learn at this time in schools.